Welcome to another conversation on public relations. So far, we've talked about research and we've talked about program planning. Today, I'd like to talk about the third step, which is communication. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and then we can get started. Okay, so communication as the third step to public relations. Any goal of a communication process could be either to inform, or to persuade, or to achieve mutual understanding. If you ever taken a speech class, we often start with this conversation. Are you communicating to inform? Are you communicating to motivate? Are you communicating to negotiate, right? So it's the same goals for public relations. It's to inform, to persuade, or to achieve mutual understanding. And based on what we decide, our goal is our plan, our execution of the plan, our evaluation of the plan, everything changes. And everything has to be tailored based on one of these goals. Okay, so I have an interesting sheet here for you, and I'd like you to take a look at it closely. This is what we call an integrated public relations media model. Okay, so quite honestly, traditional approaches no longer work. So we have to find a way to sort of integrate and combine media models to figure out what works, right? So let's look at it closely. You're seeing public media as the first one. What's the point of that? Whether you want to build awareness, you want to build your company's reputation, you want to stimulate public discussion. Here are the tools that you would use to make that happen. So not all of it is public relations. It's an integrated approach. So you will see some advertising stuff as well. You'd see some paid activities there as well. But you'd also do billboards and displays and, things, publicity related stuff, which are very much public relations focused, right? Everything nowadays, we tend to look at it in a more integrated fashion. Often public relations and advertising could be a part of the larger marketing department. So it's great to know your skill as a public relations specialist, but also to know how you would work along with other departments within that larger marketing space. The next one you're seeing there is controlled media. This is basically things that, you can share more information, and often it's through your own company's websites and own company's initiatives. So if you're creating brochures, or you're creating some kind of ad or like video about your company, any kind of newsletter, those kinds of things are more controlled, but often like promotion based. Then there's interactive media, right? So things that, if you have a blog for your company and you're sharing that information, or you have more reports that your company may have written and you get to share that information, or there could be an online forum where you can communicate with your customer through social media too. All of that stuff is more interactive in a way to engage your customer base and respond to any kind of reviews or questions, so that is what we call interactive media. Then there is events, which, basically help people understand either you're launching something or you're sharing some specific information which is new, which is unique, which is different from what you shared before. It might be to be top of mind. It could be to change people's attitudes. And of course, that's something that public relations does well through events, through conferences, through presentations, through demonstrations, through sweepstakes programs, by giving people badges, things like that. So events is also one of those media groups that you could be considering here. And then finally, you're seeing one-on-one communication, which often if you're lobbying for something, then you've hired a public relations specialist who is a lobbyist in a specific field to go talk to government officials and have those one-on-one conversations with them. So that is often a point of negotiation, or trying to resolve something during a crisis or during some kind of lobbying event. So the point I'm making based on what you're seeing here in this model is the traditional approach of just doing one thing or one of these groups no longer works, that we need to kind of combine different public relations tools to make something happen nowadays. Okay. Let's move on to another table that I'm seeing here. And we didn't talk about social media as much in the last slide, but I really love this social media campaign that DoubleTree, the hotel chain, did. And you're seeing that they're doing different things on different social media platforms. And so that's important too. So Twitter, or X as we call it now, see the things that were done, look at hashtags that were put together, and you continue doing that. You use the same hashtag for every post, and that's how you build momentum around that hashtag. There's constant feeds that you need to share information. Often that has to be real time. So the people who are following are really dedicated to following it. If you're doing Facebook, there's a table that you can decide what you're going to send out when, and share it based on that schedule that you may have created. The idea is to continue to keep that buzz going. And so you're seeing different tactics that are being put in place for the brand. This is an older table, so you're seeing Foursquare, which is very geolocation based, and this is something that, was very popular a while ago, not anymore. There's blogger relations, which is so important because you honestly can't get and be everywhere at the same time. So you reach out to influencers, you reach out to those who have magazines, those who have blogs, to say, would you partner with us? Would you share this information out? It's a great idea. It's a great campaign. Work with us and we'll be grateful. So, again, that is something that you would work with the blogger to see, can you offer sweepstakes? Can you hold contests? And we'll take care of some of those costs. Awards that you would give out could be awards for DoubleTree, things like that. And so there's constant outreach to make that happen. So just even within social media, there's so much planning that is required for each different media. One strategy doesn't work for all the platforms, and so it's different for each section. All right, I'm going to move on and talk about a public relations perspective. Okay, so since we are talking about communication, we really need to think about the message that we are sharing out. So let's make a note of this as we go along, right? While planning a message, you want to think about several factors. Number one is message exposure. So what does message exposure mean? That the people you're trying to reach out to are getting your message in different ways. Okay, so we need to work out which channels will we use, which channels are our audience members on, and how do we find different ways to reach out to these people and share our message. Okay, so that's message exposure. Second, accurate dissemination, which basically means that even if the message is being sent out in different ways through different channels, the main idea of the message stays the same, that it doesn't, when you think of Chinese whispers, and there's the game where you whisper a word to your partner and that person continues in a circle to whisper the same word, and by the time the last person gets that information, It sounds like weird, right? And so that's exactly what we don't want, right? We want to make sure that whatever the message from whatever channel and whoever is sharing it or resharing out, the message that is being shared is accurate. Number 3 is message acceptance. We want people to believe in our message. We want people to trust our message. Only when people believe and trust will they accept. If they don't accept, then we failed, right? Because we've not been able to either expose them to the message or make our message believable. Okay, so that's message acceptance. The next one is attitude change, which basically means that not only did your people, your audience, not only were they exposed to the message, not only was the message accurate, not only did they trust and believe that message, they actually changed their attitude toward that message. So if they didn't believe in a specific cause, and you shared message about that cause, they eventually accepted that, and they also decided that maybe they really need to rethink their perspective to your perspective, right? So that's good. It's an attitude change. It's almost like a mental commitment to say, I'm willing to listen because I trust this person. Okay. And then the final one is changing in behavior. So not only they're willing to listen, they've decided to act on it in a way that is favorable to you. Okay, so it may mean, yes, it's a more expensive shoe, but I'm going to buy it, right? Because they've heard your conversation about why this shoe matters and why it's great for your feet and why it's the one that you need to buy if you want to run a 5K. All right, so change, and therefore I'm going to go buy it, right? So whenever you're planning a message, you want to think about all of these things. Is it an appropriate message? Is it trustworthy? Is it memorable? Will people understand what I'm saying? Will they act on it and believe me? And will they eventually buy something that I am suggesting? It could be a service, it could be an idea, it could be a product. Okay, so that's the public relations perspective. Very important to have this conversation on communication of your message. Okay, let's move on to something that you may have heard many, many, many times, right? Public relations is all about a two-way communication. If you are just the one sharing the message, then it's not a dialogue. Then you're not engaging. So it is a give and take. This is what we got for you. I hope you like it. Well, somebody's saying, I don't love this part. Okay, well, let's talk about this part and, let's understand why you don't like it. And maybe we'll come to a point where you'd like what we're talking about or you'd like what we're selling, right? The idea is that it is a dialogue. It is an engagement between all of the different organizational stakeholders and the organization itself. So any communication, for it to be audience-centered, has to be two-way, okay? For it to be effective, has to be two-way. Just something that you want to remember as we move along. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about theory here, okay? These concepts are based on years of research, and they work. Okay, so let's talk about the first one here. And this is called the media uses and gratification theory of communication. Now, the word theory might sound intimidating, but it's not. The only point we're making here is, as a communicator, my job is to inform or persuade you, right? As the receiver of the communication, you want to learn about what I have to talk about. So that's that. Okay, so people make intelligent choices about what messages need their attention or fulfill their needs. And therefore, communicators communicate, receivers receive that information. And that's what this particular theory is all about. Okay, let's move on to another one. Number 2. Here we talk about 2 and 3. Here we talk about passive audiences and active audiences. Passive audiences need a diversion. So there are people who don't really want to think, okay? They want to be couch potatoes, basically. And we've all been there. We all like to do that sometime, okay? So as the graphic there will show you, the media is feeding you and you're getting fed, okay? Keep in mind here, you're not the audience. You've put on the hat of a public relations specialist, okay? So you want to ask yourself, how do I entertain my passive audience? How do I entertain them for them to just kind of hang around and, eat or eat popcorn, whatever, and watch something, right? So they like creative stuff. Give them photos, give them slogans, make it fun for them, entertain, okay? Divert their mind so they're not thinking about whatever reality they're dealing with, but they're in a different world and they're having a good time. They're being entertained. So keep that in mind when you are communicating to an audience that is passive. They're just listening and taking everything in. Active audience number 3. This is a little bit different. This audience is already engaged. They already like you, okay? So how do we engage this kind of audience? If the audience already likes you and your brand, then you want to give them a little bit more. So maybe share some more subject matter stuff, right? Some more, bring in experts into the conversation, invite them to certain talks, things like that. So give extra information to audiences who already like you and entertain the audiences that are couch potatoes. Entertain them with creative stuff, photos, videos, increase the stickiness of your video, your page, that's what you need to focus on. Okay. The question you're trying to ask here, what behavior are we trying to motivate, right? In the end, you want them to act, to love you, to buy your product, to change perception. It depends. But you need to ask yourself that. What behavior are you trying to motivate? Okay. And that brings us to the 4th theory, which is concept of triggering events. So an event could lead to a lot of responses if it's an event that needs people's attention, right? Where people will be motivated to act. So whether it's flu season or COVID time, or there is that almost inherent willingness to follow, to listen, to believe. Okay, so that's what we call a concept of triggering event. Certain kinds of events will lead to a rapid response rate that people will believe, will follow, will agree, will be motivated because of the event itself. Okay, moving on, which is something, this is a section that I really love. Finding ways to create sensory experiences are often great. At one of my jobs, I used to work at a company called Spa Finder, and it was a Google of spas, and I was part of the research department there, and I really learned a lot about wellness in that role. One event that Spa Finder did every year, it was based out of New York City, and there was a huge terminal, Grand Central Terminal. And they used to rent out half the space there at the entrance. And they invited all of these spas to come in there and to showcase their services. And they said, for all of you, you need to find ways to indulge the senses. And so when you had an opportunity to tap into taste and hearing and sight and smell and touch, what it did was provide a beautiful experience for people who were walking in. They've had a long day at work and they're either heading back home or they're getting back into the city, and they're smelling all this amazing aroma of infused oil, and they're having people, there were chairs there and people could sit there and they could get their massages for 30 seconds. And it was beautiful. They had some sound therapy going on, and there was some soothing spa music playing. Just think about what something like that can do, right? You're given infused lavender water to drink. Like it was a beautiful 5 minutes that so many people received. And that kind of event really stays with you, right? It builds very positive energy for the person who's experiencing it. So as a PR person, I thought that was a great idea, right? To create a sensory experience for your customers and your potential customers. I mean, these spas then eventually gave out, here's $30 off on a $100 massage, or here's, $20 off on a 40-minute foot reflexology session. Just come into our spas, and we're located here. It was such perfect branding. But a very experiential, sensory experience events. And they really do work. So just something to consider as a strategy as a PR profession. Okay. Whenever we communicate, we know, if you've ever taken a public speaking class, that you want to start your conversation with a hook, right? With a hook. Tell them something interesting, exciting, and now you have their attention for a short time, but you have their attention, okay? Talk about something that can benefit them. If I talk to you about me, I know you're polite, you're good people, you listen, but if I talk to you about you, you're most likely to listen, right? It's fundamental public speaking 101. So let's use what we know from that into public relations as we learn to communicate with our audiences. People, well, this is a remote control generation. It's very hard to keep people's attention. So front load all your ideas with your main points. Front load it, which means start, talk about that ahead of time. Don't wait until the very end to have that conversation, because you want to hook the audience and you want to keep them hooked. And always channel that message, which means for anything and everything, you want to get your point across. You want to convince somebody. You want someone to listen to what you're going through. Talk about them. Talk about them. Talk about things that they're interested in, and then they're most likely to pay attention when you do that. Okay. And make the message believable. Make the message believable. Okay. Well, you need to do enough research as a communicator, public relations, brand communicator. Know enough about your brand. Don't lie. Share some kind of logic, evidence, data, statistics, because there are some listeners who only focus on that, and you don't want to lose them. Some people who already hate your brand already have preconceived notions about them, and it's very hard to shake them out of it. So focus on the people who will listen, who are looking to learn more about your brand, to trust your brand, to believe in your brand. So just something that paying attention to, focus on the folks who are on the fence and folks who really like your brand. Focus less on the people who just hate it anyway because what they believe it's hard to change. So that's okay. Maybe out of that group, there might be some who will eventually start listening because they've heard your message so many times that even if they don't totally trust you, they will start listening and believing in your message. And that is a concept that we call the sleeper effect. But in general, let's focus on folks who are highly involved and focus on the folks who care about the data because they want to trust and believe your brand. Okay. Right? So that's your audience that you focus on. Okay, repetition is super important. You have to repeat your messages. If you just send out something one time or twice and you hope that people are just going to listen to you and believe you and remember your message and act on it, well, that's not going to happen because honestly, it takes time and companies have pretty decent communication budgets to share information with their audiences and all their stakeholders because with repetition, there will be an effect on the audience. But if it's just one time or twice, maybe not so much. Okay, I love this 5-stage adoption process, and I want to talk to you about it. Okay, so think about anything that you may be considering to buy. Okay, how did you learn about that brand? And what was that journey? What was your consumer journey from being aware of that brand to eventually buying or adopting that brand or service? Okay. Think about that. Maybe you were you were thinking of buying a car. Well, when did you learn about this brand of car or this model of car? Okay. Did someone tell you about it? Did you see an ad on TV? Did you see a billboard? Did you read about it? Where did you hear about it? Okay. And then what got you more interested in that brand? Did you dig deeper? Did you look at some reviews? Did you ask somebody? And then if you really liked it, did you then go to a car dealership to drive that car? To trial drive it to see if you really liked it? Is it all the hype? And then did you love it so much that did you end up buying that car? Okay, now that's a big purchase. But even for a smaller purchase, you go through different stages, right? So just think about how somebody would do that for your brand. Because now you get to put on that PR hat again. If you had to go through that process, how would you go about it? How would you make sure that you're able to hit that consumer or potential consumer at all of these stages? Some of it could be an integrated public relations media approach. Some of it could be mostly focused on PR. Some of it could be a marketing, plan with PR sprinkled all over it. So just think about where you would hit the customer and what that journey of that customer would look like, which is not specifically only it's a brand planning conversation, the whole consumer customer journey. And if you look up customer journey on Google, you will see all sorts of amazing models. And if you were to take an advertising class, it is definitely something we talk about in detail. But it's no different from public relations and where to hit that customer through our PR strategies. It's all part of the same world. Okay. So people who are buying something that's more high commitment, right? So for a car, for example, that we just talked about, it's certainly going to take them longer. The journey is going to be longer. And maybe it's not like a straight journey. It's not linear. It's going back and forth and all over the place. But if you're trying to buy something really quick, something like like milk. That's low commitment, and that journey can be much faster, as you would imagine. Okay, so just low commitment versus high commitment. The time factors change. All right. Here's another interesting breakup that I like, and it's called the Rogers Innovation Research. Okay, so people approach innovation in different ways. So think about a new gadget in the market, like a new phone, right? Um, and a fancier one. Maybe the Apple came out with, or a cool, like a Dyson Airwrap, like something expensive and something cool. Each of us react with innovation, deal with innovation in different ways. Some of us, if we are able to afford something, we are most likely the first people to jump into it and say, I'd like to try it, right? Those kinds of people are called innovators. Some of us are opinion leaders. So we are early adopters. So we would say, well, I usually get stuff and I talk about it if I like it, and a lot of people listen to me and are influenced by me, and then they go ahead and buy it because I told them to. If you are that person, you are an opinion leader and you are an early adopter. Then there is a group that we call an easy majority, right? So this is a group of people, a larger group of people who are saying, well, I mean, we're hearing really good things about this phone. And I know a bunch of people who are thinking about buying it. So I think I'll buy it, right? Then there's the late majority. That's saying, well, I mean, maybe pretty much everybody around me has that phone, and I think it might be a good idea to get it. And then you go buy it, right? So you're slightly skeptical, but then eventually you see everyone else around you buying it and you buy it. And finally, there are laggards. I mean, this is a slightly older population who are late adopters because everybody has it. And you're like, well, everybody's had it for the last 3 years. I mean, I better go get it. That you're more traditional, but eventually you will adopt. So people approach innovation and products in different ways. And we want to do two things here. One, ask yourself where you fit in. Okay? And that's just for fun, because that's something you should know who you are, right? Where you fit in. And no shame in any, right? Um, Second, now put on that PR hat and think about your brand. And now ask yourself, how do I hit and who do I hit with my strategies? Okay, different answers for different goals. Eventually, I would say easy majority is your happy place, right? That's where you need to be focusing on mostly. But to create a buzz, you may have to go to the early adopters. Often those are influencers on social media, or maybe some writers who talk about technology, if it's a phone, and have them write about it, experience it, right? So those are the areas that you need to focus on. But then you need to continue your conversation. So more of the late majority group will come join you as well. Okay, all right. All right, and the final slide for communication is the voice of the consumer. Word of mouth, as you know, has been a strategy that has always worked as a great PR strategy, right? So if you have people who are willing to talk about your brand, it's because that they love your brand. It's because that they really enjoy using your brand. So you need to promote that. Find a way to get the consumers to do the talking for you. And a good way for us to do that is to find leaders, opinion leaders, who would be willing and excited to share or showcase your brand because they love it. Okay, so just something to think about, that the voice of the consumer matters. The consumer is always right. So if we have our consumers, our customers talking about how great a company is, or how great a service is, or how they've really enjoyed the fit that this particular brand of clothing has, well, amplify that, because that's the best way to build trust, right? That's the best way to build trust. Okay, so we've talked about multiple things today across, I would say, about 17 to 18 slides. And this concludes the third step to public relations, which is communication. Thank you.